Hello there. If you like truth, you'll like it here. Welcome. Love and Marriage Huntsville. The positive effects of walking away from what no longer serves you and what no longer feeds your spirit. Full disclosure. I was not originally going to talk about this. I had 5 pieces already written and ready to go. At one point, while I was away on vacation, floating around on a floaty with a non-alcoholic strawberry daiquiri in one hand and half of a shrimp po' boy in the other, I'd gone to browse YouTube and saw that all heck had broken loose in the Love and Marriage Huntsville world. I powered off my phone and continued floating around in a 2-piece, turning my husband on and grossing my children out, but I mentally organized yet another piece that I thought you guys might enjoy. The story I was going to tell you guys almost wrote itself, and it would have given y'all a good laugh. But when I got home, I could not pull the trigger. I thought it was because I was post-vacation tired. You know how sometimes you come back from vacation and all you want to do is lie around and do nothing? Well, that's what I thought I was feeling. Even though I am allergic to lying around and doing nothing, and had plenty of time to just read, relax, and soak up the sun, I still thought I needed more. Now, I had no problem summoning up the energy to work at my other businesses, and to get out and garden, and get back in the gym. When I got back, I was well rested and superficially tanned to go along with my natural one, as well as 4 pounds heavier. So I was in the gym sweating like Martel's mistress when she's low on Skittles. So I definitely had time and had energy to get back in the gym. But I just could not pull the trigger on releasing videos pertaining to Love and Marriage Huntsville. I realized that I didn't care enough to care. And I was over the drama and chaos and shenanigans of a bunch of middle-aged males posing as men and low self-esteem females, making it easy for these men to treat them like trash. My spirit is not fed from this show. If anything, it is starved of anything good. My energy is not restored from this show. If anything, it is drained. This show leaves me tired and frustrated on behalf of the women who deserve more, and it leaves me annoyed with the men who walk over these women with effortless ease. I cannot stay in a situation or around a situation that doesn't feed my spirit. I am a walkawayer, and I have found the rewards of walking away from such situations to be innumerable. Too many times we keep ourselves in situations that are meant to rob us of our peace or energy or joy. Why? In some cases, we must stay and endure. In dealing with illness or things we cannot change, which, in my opinion, are few and far between, because we often have more power than we give ourselves credit for. But there are times where it isn't simple to walk away. This isn't one of those cases, and these aren't one of those times. Because this show is supposed to be entertainment. Yet, what is entertaining about it? What is entertaining about a show that deprives women of the self-respect they deserve and rewards men for the chaos they create? I'm not going to get too far into this now, because I deal with it in another piece which I will release at some point. I just didn't want to sully my 50th video anniversary with more Love and Marriage Huntsville fodder. This is my 50th video, y'all. I wanted it to serve a purpose and bring about some good, so I decided to write about this instead. This show doesn't serve anyone other than its producer, as well as the men who need the income because they are too lazy and likely underqualified to get real jobs. Plus, when would they have time to get real jobs when they're so busy allegedly chasing skirts? There are benefits to walking away from what doesn't serve you or feed your spirit, like I like to say. Instead of telling y'all what they are, let me instead tell you a story of a time when I had to learn this lesson for myself. While in grad school, I was one of 2 Black women who were both taking a particular class. She and I were the only 2 Black people in the class, and I was the youngest, as the class was for upper-level graduate students, and this was my first semester in graduate school. The other students were third years, and I was a first year. The other Black woman in the class, along with me, was 2 years older than I was. The class was called Intellectual Assessments of Adults, and in it we studied and learned to administer IQ tests. Something I have always done before school starts is to read all of my textbooks, cover to cover, before the first day of school. I have done this since elementary school, always using my older siblings' books to get access to the material before the books would be handed out on the first day of school. On that first day of that intellectual assessment of adults class, imagine my surprise when an older white student began to assert that whites were intellectually superior to blacks, as evidenced by the reported results in the book. I, of course, had something to say about this. What the other students didn't know was that I had already read the textbook, including the initial pages, those pages before page 1, that discuss how the statistics were compiled and what population they were normalized on. Because I had already read that part, I had seen that the IQ test hadn't been normalized on black people, meaning they'd been given to white people, studied on white people, with a baseline score determined by that population of white people, then given to black people afterwards. What all this means is it was a test where white folks decided what constituted or determined intelligence, then used that measure of intelligence that they created by them and for them to apply across other populations. To put it simply, it would be like me making up a secret game that I didn't tell you about, then determining that I played it better because not only did you not know the rules of the game, you didn't even know how to play it. Of course, in that scenario, you'd play a game I was kept out of even being a part of better. When I explained this to the students, because by now they had all begun to jump in support of each other, with their conclusions of superiority, but when I explained to them that the test was normalized on them, for them, and by them, and so its results could not be reliably nor validly applied to other populations, particularly not to assert superiority, they were mad. They were hot and angry and began to clamor over each other to defend their superiority from a new to the program young buck who had the nerve to be in their prestigious program and younger than them to boot. They probably would have been even more upset if they'd known I had also been the first call the program directors and professors had made when they were informing my cohort who'd been accepted into the program. But I digress. What I will say is that I took on that whole class by myself. The professor, who eventually became an advisor and boss of mine, was enjoying the discourse too much to intervene, and the other black student, who had been in other classes with this group, had sat silently with her head down. She had seemed whipped into shape, like she'd learned years ago to accept their behavior and had lost all fight. Or maybe she'd never had any to begin with. In any case, I eventually shut down the whole argument when I showed the class those pages in the front of the book that discussed who the tests were normalized on and, more importantly, who they weren't. And I reminded my classmates of the limitations in applying the findings across all populations. Again, in other words, and for example, of designing a test normalized on birds, using flying as a parameter or marker of intelligence, but then asserting that a turtle must be inferior to a bird because the turtle cannot fly. When I showed them the numbers, the stats supplied not by me, but by the makers of the intellectual assessments themselves, they could say nothing more. After taking on the whole class, and pretty passionately, I might add, you would think I'd have made some enemies. But the opposite happened. I gained a lot of respect from the students as well as the professor, who later pulled me in to work with him. And I also gained a lot of respect from the black student who had been in the class with me. That evening, as I walked to my car, she caught up with me and explained to me that she'd been the only black person in the program for so long that she'd forgotten how to speak up and had just learned to go along to get along. She told me that she'd enjoyed seeing me take on the whole class and wished she'd had the strength to join me. To skip ahead a bit in this story, suffice it to say, Over the following weeks of the class, she and I hit it off, and over the years of the program, because it takes me years to think of someone as a friend, she and I became great friends. The thing is, in all those years, she'd never stopped being the broken down, accept whatever from whomever person that she'd shown me she was that first day I met her. She was in a prestigious program, yet acted like she didn't belong there. She was content to let other students walk all over her. She was content to let boyfriends walk all over her. She never stood up for herself. She never asked for what she deserved. She was someone who rode around in an old broken down, rusted out hoopty that barely worked and often left her having to walk home at night, but co-signed for a car for her boyfriend. And when he stopped paying on the car, she began to pay it for him, even after she'd learned he was cheating on her. So, since she had no strength, it was I who always came to the rescue. When she learned her boyfriend was cheating after 9 years together, it was I who grabbed the phone while she sobbed and told this dude where he could go and how fast he could go there. Then it was I who booked her a spa appointment to make her feel better about herself. It was also I who she cried to when she took him back and he not only cheated on her again, but wrecked the car she'd bought him. And it was I who set up with a headache trying to talk some sense into her when she decided to co-sign yet again for yet another new car for him, while still riding around in a hoopty for herself. I could say more, but I will conclude by saying that in the many years we were friends, I did more carrying and consoling and counseling and lifting up and empowering and supporting than I'd ever done for anyone else. It got to a point that when she was calling me on the phone, my stomach would be in knots. There was always a problem, always a dilemma, always something I'd need to get her through. Yet, when I had my own tribulations, like the time a professor had started asking me out, and when I refused had begun taking it out on my grades, or the time when someone in my family had gotten really sick and I'd had to rush home to take care of them, I had not heard from her. Not a peep. Nothing. This wasn't the way things had been in the beginning, because I would have never stood for that. But it's the way things became as we both grew accustomed to me being the strength, the giver, and her being the taker. I couldn't even pretend like our friendship was anything but one-sided anymore. The knots in my stomach when she called wouldn't let me hide from what I already knew. The dread I would feel when she texted me, or when I saw I had missed a call from her, were a dead giveaway. I talked to her about it, of course, but her response was to go into the latest problem she was facing and how it was keeping her from being a good friend. With me, of course, consoling her and helping her think through solutions while ignoring how her friendship was making me feel. And one day I decided I'd had enough. It was actually after I had called to wish her child a happy birthday, but had heard nothing on either of my children's birthdays. When we spoke again and I asked her to tell me either of my children's birthdays, not both, just to show me that she knew one of their birthdays, particularly since I'd called her child on every birthday she had, she couldn't do it. She didn't know not even one of my children's birthdays. And that, for me, was the final straw. I ended the friendship and never looked back. And guess what happened? Lightness happened. Peace happened. There were no more knots in my stomach when she called because I no longer took her calls. And trust me, she called often. I had been a good friend to her for a decade and a half, and she didn't want to lose that. So she felt like the end of our friendship was a loss to her. I didn't. I felt like the end of our friendship provided a restoration of peace and an end to me carrying and protecting and writing for and supporting someone who was content to take but never to give. Again, I felt peace. And that is what I suspect many of you will feel when you walk away from the chaos and drama and mental and emotional abuse that is Love and Marriage Hip Hop. I meant Love and Marriage Huntsville. Although I wasn't watching the show and haven't for years, even just allowing it into my spirit was damaging enough. It was harmful enough that my spirit rebuked it and wouldn't let me engage, even when there are quick and easy rewards associated with doing so. Those rewards aren't worth the loss of peace, the infighting, the lawsuits, and content creators being harassed. They don't feed the spirits of the show's supporters. Instead, this show leaves the show's supporters heavy and angry and bewildered that such people exist. People such as the show's cast, and are allowed to operate as they do, and while televised at that. Not me, y'all. When I do speak about Love and Marriage Hip Hop, I mean Love and Marriage Huntsville, it will be with an intent to bring something that can help, something we can learn from, or understand better, or seek to do better, or some way I can lend some light to the situation. So if and when I can do that, if there's some way I can infuse some good into the situation, then I will. But otherwise, you guys will see me keep a wide berth away from this show. Again, unless there's some viewpoint I can take that will yield something good or bring forth some positivity. One thing I've noticed is that we are what we surround ourselves with. When we surround ourselves with positivity, we receive it into our lives. On the other hand, when we surround ourselves with negativity, then negativity reigns. Pun intended. Whether you guys join me when and if I talk about non-love and marriage Huntsville topics or not, I hope you guys will choose love and light. Y'all deserve it. All right, y'all. That's it, and that's all. Hello there. If you like truth, you'll like it here. Welcome. If you don't, or if you believe in groupthink, or bullying others into believing the popular opinion, then this isn't the place for you. So go ahead and just cancel me now. On this channel, we don't discuss my truth or your truth. We discuss the truth, and no topic is off limits. So, log in, like, subscribe, get comfy, and comment. It's nice to have you here. So let's talk.